you're not trying to get rich. You're just trying to not fall behind. And somewhere between your savings account, paying basically nothing, and watching inflation eat your paycheck alive, someone told you Bitcoin might be the answer. But then you looked at the price, and suddenly, $74,000 per coin felt like a door slamming in your face. So you started looking at cheaper options. And that right there, that single moment, is where most people completely destroy their financial future. Let me tell you something that took a lot of people years of expensive mistakes to figure out. The goal was never one full Bitcoin. That number was never realistic for regular people. The real number, the one that actually matters, the one that changes your financial trajectory permanently, is zero point 0.1 Bitcoin. Not because it makes you a millionaire overnight, but because of what it does to your mindset, your habits, and your long-term position in a world that is quietly printing your savings into worthlessness. My name is Zen, and today we're breaking down exactly why zero point 0.1 Bitcoin is the threshold that separates disciplined investors from people who will be chasing the next cheap coin forever. Let's get into it. Here's the problem nobody warns you about. Your brain is working against you. When you see Bitcoin at $74,000, something instinctive kicks in. You do the math. You've got maybe $500 to invest. That gets you a small fraction of a coin, some weird decimal number that feels almost embarrassing to say out loud. So your eyes start drifting. You find coins that cost a fraction of a penny. Suddenly, your $500 turns into millions of tokens. You feel like a major player. You feel like you own something real. Psychologists call this unit bias. Your brain values quantity over quality. It would rather have 1,000 of something worthless than a small piece of something valuable. And the entire meme coin industry is built on exploiting exactly that glitch in human psychology. Here's the brutal reality check. Look at every major market cycle in crypto history. After the hype dies, after the influencers go quiet, after the Discord servers empty out, roughly 95% of alternative coins either collapse completely or never come close to their previous highs. They don't just underperform Bitcoin, they disappear. Gene Simmons, the KISS frontman, a man worth hundreds of millions of dollars, publicly admitted he chose Dogecoin over Bitcoin primarily because he could own more of it. A celebrity with a team of financial advisors fell for the same psychological trick that catches everyday investors. If it can catch him, it can absolutely catch you. Bitcoin, meanwhile, has done something no other asset in the history of finance has done consistently. It has recovered from every single crash. Every one. 2011, 2013, 2017, 2020, 2022. Every time the headlines screamed that it was over, it wasn't over. Let's talk supply, because this is where things get genuinely uncomfortable. Bitcoin has a hard cap of 21 million coins. That number cannot be changed, cannot be negotiated, cannot be voted away by a government running a deficit. Right now, only about 450 new Bitcoin are created every single day. That number cuts in half by 2028, then cuts again. But here's what people miss. Of those 21 million coins, somewhere between 3.5 and 4 million are already permanently gone. Lost wallets, forgotten passwords, hardware destroyed. There's a man in Wales who has 8,000 Bitcoin buried under a landfill, worth over $500 million, and the local government won't let him dig for it. There's another man who has 2 password guesses left before $480 million locks forever. So your real working number isn't 21 million. It's somewhere around 16 to 17 million coins that can actually circulate. Now divide that across 8 billion people. You get roughly 0.002 Bitcoin per person if it were evenly distributed. That's around $150 at today's prices. Owning zero point 0.1 Bitcoin means you hold nearly 50 times the amount the average person on this planet could ever access. That's not a marketing line. That's just arithmetic. And it's getting more compressed by the day. Major institutions have been buying Bitcoin at a scale that removes it from retail availability entirely. When large asset managers are sitting on hundreds of thousands of coins, and when publicly traded companies are treating it as a primary treasury asset, the supply available to regular people keeps shrinking. You are not early in the way people were early in 2012, but you might still be early in the way that matters for the next decade. Let me walk you through a scenario that plays out constantly in the crypto space. Imagine someone who had $5,000 at the start of 2024. Bitcoin was around $43,000. That $5,000 could have bought roughly 116 Bitcoin, but it felt wrong. The number felt small, so instead, that money went into a trending meme token, millions of units for just a few $1,000s. Whale vibes. By summer, that position had lost over 90% of its value. The $5,000 became a few $100s. Meanwhile, that 0.116 Bitcoin would have been worth over $14,000 during the rally later that year. But the damage doesn't stop at the money. Now that person has to start over, trying to accumulate Bitcoin at $74,000 instead of $43,000. The mistake didn't just cost them profits, it reset their entire timeline. That's the hidden cost of unit bias. It doesn't just lose you money in the short term, it delays your position by years. So why specifically 0.1 Bitcoin? Why not 0.05? Or just whatever you can afford? Because 0.1 is a psychological anchor. It's specific enough to give you a real target. It's achievable enough to reach through consistent saving. And it's meaningful enough in potential future value to make the discipline worth it. Various analysts, including firms that manage billions in assets, have modeled Bitcoin price scenarios ranging from $500,000 to over $1 million per coin by 2030. Nobody knows if those numbers are right. Nobody. But let's run conservative math. If Bitcoin reaches $500,000 per coin, your 0.1 Bitcoin is worth $50,000. If it reaches $250,000, you're looking at $25,000. Even if the price only doubles from here, you've outperformed most traditional savings vehicles by a significant margin. That's not a lottery ticket. That's a reasoned, asymmetric bet on a fixed supply asset in a world of infinite money printing. Here's what nobody tells you about owning Bitcoin. The most valuable thing it gives you isn't financial. It's a complete rewiring of how you think about money. The moment you have real skin in the game, the way you evaluate purchases shifts entirely. That $90 spontaneous dinner out stops being just an expense. Your brain automatically starts converting it. That's 0.0012 Bitcoin. Maybe you still go, but now you made a conscious choice instead of an unconscious one. You start understanding concepts like inflation erosion, monetary policy, the mechanics of how money creation benefits some people before others. Not because someone lectured you, but because your attention is now tied to your own money. You stop having a short-term relationship with your finances and start building a long-term one. There's a story that circulates in Bitcoin communities about a teacher who started dollar-cost averaging small amounts weekly. Over time, the habit compounded. Not just the Bitcoin, but the discipline. A few years later, when his job became unbearable, he had enough of a financial cushion to walk away on his own terms. He wasn't rich, but he had options. And options are the real currency. That's what 0.1 Bitcoin represents at its core. Not a jackpot. Options. All right, practical side. At $74,000 per coin, getting to 0.1 Bitcoin costs around $7,400. You don't need to come up with that all at once. Dollar cost averaging is the only strategy that consistently works for regular people who aren't professional traders. You pick a fixed amount, $50, $100, $200 per week, whatever is realistic for your budget, and you automate it. Same day every week, it leaves your account and buys Bitcoin regardless of what the price is doing. When Bitcoin drops, your fixed amount buys more. When it rises, you still keep building. Over time, your average entry cost smooths out. You stop making emotional decisions because there's nothing to decide. The automation decides for you. Platforms like River, Strike, and Swan Bitcoin offer low-fee automated purchasing. Coinbase works too, though fees tend to be slightly higher. The key is setting it up once and walking away. Once you've accumulated a meaningful amount, get it off the exchange. Keeping Bitcoin on an exchange means you don't actually own it. You own a claim to it, and claims have a history of going wrong when exchanges collapse. A hardware wallet costs between $100 and $250 and removes that counterparty risk entirely. Just protect your seed phrase like it's the combination to a safe containing everything you own, because effectively it is. One more thing for Americans. Bitcoin is treated as property by the IRS. Buying and holding generates no taxable event. Selling does. If you hold for over a year before selling, long-term capital gains rates apply, which are significantly lower than short-term rates. Looking into a Bitcoin Roth IRA through providers like Swan or Unchained can also let that growth compound without a tax hit on withdrawal. Now, before you do anything, you need to understand what this actually feels like when it goes wrong. Bitcoin dropped significantly from its peak in late 2025 to early 2026. If you had bought at the top and watched your investment shrink by over 40% in a few months, that's not just a number on a screen. That's real money you worked for, evaporating while you're just living your normal life. That feeling is difficult to describe until you've lived it. And most people, when they experience it for the first time, panic, sell. They lock in the loss. They swear off crypto forever. And then they watch the recovery happen without them. If you cannot tolerate watching your investment decline by 50% without selling, Bitcoin is not the right asset for you at this time. That's not a criticism. It's self-awareness. This is a volatile, speculative asset. Anyone who tells you otherwise is selling something. There's also legitimate criticism of Bitcoin worth taking seriously. Prominent economists and financial theorists argue that an asset producing no cash flows, no dividends, no income is purely speculative. That its value depends entirely on the next person paying more than the last. This critique deserves honest engagement, not dismissal. The answer isn't that these critics are foolish. The answer is that Bitcoin is a bet on a specific thesis that fixed supply assets become more valuable over time as governments continue expanding money supply infinitely. You can believe that thesis and still acknowledge the risk. In fact, you should. Quantum computing also poses a long-term theoretical risk to Bitcoin's encryption layer. Not immediate, not likely in the near term, but not zero. Diversification isn't cowardice. Putting your entire financial future into a single volatile asset is not discipline. It's overexposure. Bitcoin should be one part of a rational financial picture, not the whole thing. Here's where we land. You started reading this, probably feeling like you missed something. Like Bitcoin already happened to other people and you were just late to the realization. That feeling is partially correct. The era of turning $1,000 into $1 million from Bitcoin is largely over. The institutional money came in. The governments started paying attention. The easy returns moved on. But here's what's also true. You are not yet at the point where owning 0.1 Bitcoin has become impossible or even particularly difficult for someone with patience and discipline. That window may not stay open forever. The question to sit with is simple. 5 years from now, which version of today will bother you more? Having bought zero point 0.1 Bitcoin and watched it be volatile along the way? Or having done nothing and watching the threshold become unreachable? Most people will never own zero point 0.1 Bitcoin. Not because they can't afford the journey, because they lack the patience, because they get distracted by coins with cartoon dogs, because they sell the first time the price drops and convinces them they made a mistake. The ones who hold through the noise, who keep buying on the way down as much as on the way up, who treat it like a savings account rather than a slot machine. Those are the people who end up on the other side of this, with options they didn't have before. Zero point 0.1 Bitcoin won't change your life tomorrow, but the discipline it takes to get there might change the rest of it. Institutions own 1 Bitcoin. Governments try to own hundreds of thousands. But 0.1 Bitcoin? That's still within reach for a regular person with a plan and the patience to see it through. The money printer doesn't stop. Inflation doesn't stop. But Bitcoin's supply cap doesn't move either. You don't have to be wealthy to play this game. You just have to be consistent when everyone else is being emotional. 0.1 Bitcoin. That's the goal. Start there. Stay there. Don't sell. If this gave you a new way of thinking about this, subscribe to Zen Invests, drop a like, and let me know in the comments, are you already stacking? Or is this the video that finally made it click?